When you watch a skyscraper being built, there's this assumption of just absolute rigid stability.
Right, you're building for permanence.
Exactly. I mean, you dig a deep hole, you pour thousands of tons of concrete, bolt the steel framework together, and you fully expect the ground beneath it to just, well, to sit still.
Yeah, the architecture is fixed, the environment is supposed to be predictable.
But imagine trying to build that exact same skyscraper, only the foundation is actively shifting beneath your feet. Like the steel beams are somehow swapping themselves out by the hour.
Wow.
Yeah, and the blueprint is rewriting itself based on some algorithm you don't fully understand. And on top of all that, the city inspector is changing the building codes while you're literally holding the hammer.
I mean, it sounds like absolute chaos, just a total nightmare for any architect.
It really does.
But honestly, if you look closely at the data we're parsing today, that is the perfect metaphor for the reality of modern business.
You're building in a storm. And if you're listening to this, whether you're managing a small team, building a massive enterprise, or just trying to navigate your own career in this 2026 economy, understanding how all these shifting pieces fit together is just a massive competitive advantage.
Definitely.
Because we're moving into a world where money is incredibly tight, labor is fluid, technology is making active decisions, and the regulatory pressures are, they're higher than they've ever been.
And the really fascinating thing is that these aren't isolated trends. They're dominoes in a single chain reaction. If you can see the whole board, you can actually anticipate the next move before it happens to you.
Okay, let's unpack this. We have to start with the foundation, which is the macro environment.
Yeah.
Let's look at the Federal Reserve's March 18, 2026 statement.
The big one.
Right. They held the federal funds rate at 3.12 to 3.34%. And the statement explicitly cited that inflation remains, quote, somewhat elevated, and job gains have been low. Now, just to state the objective fact here, the decision wasn't unanimous. Steve Namiran dissented. He actually wanted a quarter-point cut. But the reality on the ground is that rates are holding steady. Capital is constrained.
And that constrained capital is the first domino. It literally dictates everything else we're going to talk about today.
How so?
Well, when money is expensive, when you can't just borrow at 0% interest, a business's margin for error effectively shrinks to zero.
Right.
You can't just throw massive rounds of venture capital at a problem anymore. And you definitely cannot afford to expand your permanent full-time headcount blindly and just, pray that the revenue catches up.
All costs is basically dead.
Completely dead.
Which perfectly explains the wild numbers we're seeing in these 2026 workforce predictions from Zeal.
Oh, those numbers are wild.
They really are. They're pointing out that the U.S. labor market isn't just shifting, it's fundamentally bifurcating. The gig economy is officially becoming the second largest labor market.
Right.
In 2023, 38% of U.S. workers, that's 64 million people, freelanced in some capacity. And they project that to hit 90.1 million by 2028.
We are approaching half the workforce operating entirely outside the traditional corporate structure.
It's staggering, but we have to be incredibly precise about what kind of gig work we're talking about here, right? Because the narrative is shifted.
Yeah, this isn't just people driving for a rideshare app or delivering groceries on the weekends to make extra cash.
Exactly. The Zeal report highlights what they call track 2 of the gig economy. And these are high-skill, high-earning independent workers.
We're talking about senior software engineers, fractional CFOs, cybersecurity compliance experts.
Yeah, and their numbers literally doubled from 13.6 million in 2020 to 27.7 million in 2024. But here is the massive logistical hurdle.
The liability issue.
Right. If I'm running a major enterprise in a highly regulated industry, say healthcare logistics or warehousing or transportation, I physically cannot accept the legal liability of using a purely independent contractor for critical work.
You really can't. The compliance risks, the insurance liabilities, the sheer danger of an unvetted contractor handling hazardous materials or patient data is just way too high.
So how are the platforms solving this?
They're hybridizing. Staffing platforms are now offering both W-2 and 1099 lines within the exact same operating system.
Okay, let's break down why that matters.
So a W-2 means the worker is legally an employee of the platform. The platform absorbs the taxes, the benefits, and crucially, the liability.
Got it.
A 1099 means they're an independent contractor. By offering both, these platforms give enterprise clients the flexibility to scale their workforce up and down instantly, while legally sheltering the enterprise from the risk.
Okay, I have to push back a little here, though. Are these hybrid platforms basically just becoming corporate temp agencies on steroids?
Huh, that's one way to look at it.
Because if you're a business owner, how on earth do you maintain a cohesive corporate culture or institutional memory or just basic team stability when half of your highly skilled workforce might just be renting their brains out to you for a 3-month sprint?
You've hit on the core tension of the modern enterprise right there. But to understand it, we really have to look at the why.
Okay.
This hybridization isn't about making workers feel like they belong to a family. It's a structural defense mechanism.
Defense against what?
The economy. When you're trying to survive the Fed's constrained capital environment, that 312 to 334% rate reality, you cannot afford to take on permanent liabilities.
Ah, I see.
Culture becomes secondary to survival. You need labor that scales instantly based on demand. The fluidity isn't a bug in the system. Right now, it is the defining feature.
Okay, but logistically, if you have this incredibly fluid hybrid workforce constantly rotating in and out of your projects, how do you actually process the work?
That's the million-dollar question.
Right. Because if the humans are constantly shifting, institutional memory just vanishes. Like when
Yeah.
the fractional CFO leaves, who remembers how the invoices are routed?
Well, human managers simply cannot orchestrate that level of turnover and complexity manually. It's physically impossible to onboard, train, and manage handoffs at that speed.
Which brings us to the software side of the house.
Exactly.
Because businesses are turning to AI to automate the complex workflows that these fluid workers plug into.
Yeah.
We have the technical specs here for JobRouter's version 2026.1 update.
A really fascinating pivot for them.
Yeah. They're embedding AI agents directly into the heart of process automation. And they draw a really sharp contrast that I think is vital.
The shift away from rule-based systems.
Right. The old way of automating was rule-based. If X happens, do Y. If the invoice is over $10,000, send it to the director. Just simple rules.
But AI agents are taking over tasks that are way too complex for simple rules.
The shift here is profound. We're moving from software that follows instructions to software that makes evaluations.
Yes. The report uses invoice processing as a specific example.
Which sounds boring, but it's actually wild.
It really is. Instead of just routing a digital PDF from one inbox to another, the AI agent actively reads the invoice, compares it with the original purchase data, and cross-references it with the goods receipt from the loading dock.
Yep.
And if it spots a discrepancy, it doesn't just flag it and stop like old software would. It evaluates the discrepancy, and then it generates and justifies posting suggestions based on historical data.
So it remembers what the company did 3 years ago, even if all the human workers from 3 years ago were gone.
Exactly. And they're building massive enterprise guardrails around this. The specs note, it's strictly GDPR compliant. All data is processed in localized European data centers. And this is key. The foundational models explicitly do not learn from customer data to prevent leaks.
That's huge for privacy.
And every single micro decision the AI makes is fully auditable.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting, though.
Hit me.
Using AI to make complex manual business decisions feels a bit like putting a self-driving car in the middle of a busy, chaotic intersection.
That's a great analogy.
Are we just trading easily identifiable human errors like Bob in accounting typing the wrong zero for algorithmic black box errors that literally no one understands?
That's the fear, right?
Yeah. And practically speaking, how does a fluid hourly gig worker actually interact with an AI boss that is telling them a discrepancy needs to be handled?
So the self-driving car analogy is actually perfect. Initially, yes, it feels dangerous to take your hands off the wheel. But what JobRouter is doing by moving toward a no-code experience is systematically dropping the barrier to entry.
Meaning you don't need a massive IT team.
Exactly. You don't need a PhD in computer science to set these agents up anymore. And if we connect this to our shifting workforce, the AI is no longer just a cool IT experiment. The AI agent is the permanent infrastructure.
Yeah.
It's the glue holding that transient workforce together. The AI holds the memory. The gig worker just executes the immediate task the AI assigns them.
So the AI is the permanent employee and the highly skilled human is the temporary peripheral.
Essentially, yes.
That is a wild paradigm shift. But think about the absolute mess this creates behind the scenes. As soon as you have highly skilled gig workers logging in remotely from a coffee shop, and AI agents autonomously making workflow decisions and routing financial data, your enterprise's attack surface just exploded.
Oh, massively.
And your privacy liabilities are through the roof.
In a decentralized architecture, risk doesn't just grow, it multiplies. And regulators are absolutely not sitting this out.
Not at all. Let's dive into the legal sources. We have a roadmap from the law firm Butler Snow outlining the CCPA 2026 amendments. That's the California Consumer Privacy Act, which effectively acts as the national standard for the U.S. now.
Right.
And this isn't some distant horizon warning. They outline immediate 30 to 90-day near-term priorities for businesses. First, your privacy policies now have to spell out the specific categories of personal information you've shared with vendors in the last 12 months.
They are shining a massive spotlight on vendor data flows. They know you're using an army of freelancers and third-party AI tools, and they want to know exactly what data you're feeding them.
And here is the kicker. The end of passive consent.
Oh, I love this part.
You know how you used to go to a website, a giant cookie pop-up would appear, and you would just hit the little X in the corner to make it go away?
Yeah.
And the site was like, cool, they didn't say no, so that means yes.
The classic dark pattern.
Exactly. It was psychological friction designed to exhaust you into agreeing. Well, that is explicitly illegal now.
Good.
You have to provide active, visually symmetrical yes and no options. You cannot make the yes track me button giant and bright blue and the no button tiny gray and hidden at the bottom.
It's forcing absolute architectural transparency at the user interface level. They're removing the psychological tricks.
And businesses visibly have to honor global privacy control, or GPC, signals. Plus, opting out must have the exact same number of steps or fewer as opting in.
It's a huge win for consumers.
But the privacy side is just one half of the regulatory clampdown. Let's look at the March 2026 NIST Cybersecurity Framework 2.0 Quick-Start Guide, specifically Special Publication 1308.
Okay, alphabet soup alert. Let's translate this.
Yeah, please.
NIST is essentially the government's gold standard playbook for how not to get hacked. And this new document is forcing a shotgun marriage between enterprise risk management, cybersecurity risk management, and workforce management.
It's a massive shift. They're saying you can no longer treat cybersecurity as just an IT problem involving firewalls and passwords.
Right. It explicitly points to the NIST framework, which uses TKS statements, task, knowledge, and skill. Basically, organizations have to map out exactly who has the specific verifiable skills to protect their high-value assets.
Okay.
And if they don't have those skills in-house, they have to decide whether to upskill their current team, hire new people, or augment with third parties to cover those vulnerabilities.
They're treating human competency as a measurable, auditable security control.
Exactly.
Let me challenge the practicality of this, though. If you guys are framing CCPA and NIST as the strict building inspectors of this new architecture,
Sure.
if I am a business owner, I'm already dealing with expensive capital, a fragmented workforce, and AI integrations. Now you're telling me I have to cross-reference a BIA, a business impact analysis of my worst-case scenarios with my HR department's hiring plans?
Yeah.
Doesn't this just create an absolute bureaucratic nightmare that slows me down when the market is demanding agility?
If we connect this to the bigger picture,
Hurry!
it absolutely feels bureaucratic. And frankly, a lot of businesses are going to stumble trying to implement it.
I bet.
But the regulators don't care about your agility. They care about preventing catastrophic data breaches.
Fair point.
If an AI agent routes sensitive data to a track-to freelancer, and you have no documentation proving that freelancer has the validated knowledge and skill to handle it securely, your entire risk management strategy is a fiction.
Wow.
The paperwork slows you down, yes, but it forces you to prove that the transient people touching your data actually know what they are doing.
Which means the ultimate burden of all this compliance, all this tech, and all this fluid labor management falls heavily on someone's shoulders. We've built an economy of tight money, fluid labor, AI workflows, and intense regulatory audits.
And someone has to manage it all.
Right. All of that crushing weight lands squarely on the leaders and the founders trying to hold it together. Which brings us to our final source, and honestly the most human one in the stack.
The human toll of the modern architecture.
Yeah. We have a study here from C-Suite Outlook on founder resilience. And the opening stat is staggering. 88% of CEOs admit that excessive stress directly led to at least one major strategic error in the past fiscal year.
88%.
Almost everyone running a company made a massive mistake because they were too stressed to think straight. And venture capitalists are catching on. VCs are now conducting what they call human capital due diligence.
They view founder burnout as a top 3 risk factor for startup failure.
Which is a huge departure from the old Silicon Valley glorification of the sleepless founder who works 100-hour weeks and sleeps under their desk.
Yeah, that is now seen by investors as a major financial liability, not a badge of honor.
Completely. And the article breaks down how leaders are trying to survive this using a literal resilience formula.
A math equation for stress.
Yeah. It defines resilience as being proportional to your recovery plus your systems, divided by your stress, multiplied by decision fatigue. So it's simple math.
Yeah.
To survive, you either increase your recovery and your systems or you decrease your stress and your decision fatigue.
It turns mental health into a quantifiable operational metric.
And they use specific mental models to achieve it. There's the inversion model. Instead of waking up and asking, how do I make $1 million today?
Yeah.
You ask, what 5 things could absolutely destroy my mental health and my business this quarter? And you build defensive systems to avoid them.
Smart.
Then there's the infinite game model, which is a psychological tool to prevent catastrophic thinking. It's viewing a lost contract or a massive failure as just a single turn in a game that never ends, rather than a final, fatal blow.
What's fascinating here is how incredibly structured the approach to psychological survival has become.
Oh, it's militaristic. Look at their daily routines. 64% of successful founders wake before 6 a.m., but they aren't waking up to hustle.
No.
No, they use it for a 90-minute low dopamine window. No Slack, no emails, no news, just quiet. They also practice a strict 24-hour digital Sabbath on the weekends, completely disconnecting from screens. And the data shows this yields a 22% boost in cognitive clarity by Monday morning.
I believe it.
But here is the detail that really stopped me in my tracks. In 2026, leaders are using AI-driven wearables to track their HRV, their heart rate variability.
Which is a biological measure of how well your nervous system is recovering from stress.
Exactly, and if their recovery score drops below 40%, they use that as a hard data signal to immediately cancel high-stress meetings, delegate their tasks, and only do isolated deep work.
It's fascinating.
But wait, I have to point out the extreme irony here. To survive the stress of managing all this tech and data and AI workflows, leaders are strapping on more tech to track their own biological data.
Yeah, it sounds counterintuitive.
Doesn't a smartwatch beeping at you telling you that your nervous system is shot just give you more anxiety?
You would think so, but the psychological reality for these founders is the exact opposite. Resilience in 2026 is no longer about gritting it out. It's about building an internal moat.
An internal moat, okay.
When you're carrying the weight of a hybrid workforce, AI integrations, and CCPA compliance, your subjective feeling of being tired simply isn't a strong enough signal to make you stop working. You will always convince yourself to push through just one more hour.
Oh, for sure.
And that is exactly when the 88% of strategic errors happen.
You ignore your own warning lights because you think you have to be superhuman.
Exactly. The wearable data removes the emotion and the ego from the equation. If your HRV is under 40%, delegating isn't a sign of weakness. It's not a lack of dedication. It is a mathematical, strategic necessity to avoid decision fatigue.
Wow.
It actually gives the founder permission to rest because the data proves their cognitive battery is empty. They're managing their own biology with the same clinical precision they use to manage their AI agents.
So what does this all mean? Let's step back and look at the whole board we've laid out today.
Okay.
We started with the macro squeeze. The Fed holding rates tight means money isn't free anymore. That financial constraint forces businesses to abandon traditional permanent hiring and instead rely on a highly fluid, bifurcated gig economy turning to hybrid staffing platforms just to mitigate the legal liability.
Because that labor is so fluid, humans can no longer manage the day-to-day handoffs.
Right, so companies are embedding AI agents right into the heart of their process automation to act as the permanent memory. But that combination of remote gig workers and autonomous AI creates massive new vulnerabilities,
Huge ones.
which triggers regulators to drop the hammer with strict CCPA privacy rules and NIST frameworks that force you to treat human resources as serious cybersecurity risks.
Every solution creates a new, more complex problem.
It really does. And the sheer weight of architecting this entire chaotic, shifting system rests entirely on the founders. They are now resorting to measuring their own heart rate variability just to know if they're biologically capable of making a safe decision on a Tuesday afternoon. We are literally watching the architecture of the enterprise be rebuilt from the ground up.
We really are. And if we connect this to the bigger picture and go all the way back to your opening metaphor of building a skyscraper on shifting ground, it leaves us with a rather profound reality to consider.
What's that?
Well, if businesses are optimizing absolutely everything, using AI to process workflows, complex algorithms to manage the gig workers, compliance frameworks to dictate the hiring, and wearables to literally dictate a leader's biological capacity to lead on any given day, At what point does the human founder cease to be the architect of the building and simply become just another managed node in the enterprise algorithm?
Wow. That is a wild, fascinating question to ponder as we navigate the 2026 landscape. Thank you for taking this deep dive with us today. We'll see you next time.